Okay, so today we're going to be testing this out. This is going to be the first time we've live streamed some forging, so we'll see how it goes. Let's get started. Okay, for any of you wondering, this is a piece of 5160 spring steel, and we're going to be looking to kind of draw this out today and make probably a drop point hunter out of it. But this is kind of what we're starting with. You'll be able to see it better when I'm forging, but I wanted you to get at least a view of what it looks like before we start. Okay, so that's going to take a few minutes to heat up. So this is also kind of an AMA, so if you have a question regarding forging or blacksmithing in general, knife making, whatever it is, just go ahead and throw it in there. So before we get started, sorry, I spilled water on myself. if you're gonna do stuff like this, make sure that you're using proper safety equipment. Like you'll see me wearing my gloves and stuff like that. Typically, I would wear like a longer shirt, but it's super hot and muggy right now, so I chose less protection and a little more comfort. But I also have enough burns on my arms and stuff, my hands, to like I know what I'm getting into. So if you're not into that, wear a lot of equipment. Sorry, it's hot here. So what I'm looking at doing today is probably creating something that's about a 3 to 4 inch blade. Probably won't get to the handle or any of that today. Today is just really about like forging it out. And if it goes pretty quickly, I may start a second project. Not really sure yet. Alright, we're almost there. Heating it up the first time always takes the longest amount of time. After that, the heats will be pretty quick. But yeah, so for safety gear, the two things I would always use, pretty much regardless. I know some people are, like your old guys, like to not have gloves. I always wear gloves. I'm just not really interested in accidentally touching hot metal. And then the other thing that I always wear is safety glasses, because once you've forged, like, for any amount of time, you will start to notice that, like, pieces of scale will come off as you're forging, and that stuff is just like hot little pieces of metal that go everywhere. You don't want that in your eyes, for sure. So I wear like usually some kind of either safety glasses or something that's like ballistically rated. It's not necessary, it's just what I have, so I use it. But you do want something that at least covers most of your eye, and if you can get something that actually like goes up against your face, not to the point where like it fogs up and you can't see, but like just enough to not get anything in there, it'll drastically improve your life. Alright, we should be good for the first one. Got to make sure that you actually have the heat turned up. So today we're going to be working on a drop point hunter, and then, like I said, we'll see if we want to move on to something later. Kind of all depends. But a knife, that's the answer to your question, a knife. Alright. Let's try this one more time. There we go. What you can see here is we're going to thin down the whole thing to get our length, and then we'll start pushing it outward to get more width. It's hot out here. So I haven't quite decided exactly what handle material I want to put on this one. I'm leaning towards like a walnut handle for the finish, and then maybe like silver pins, not like silver, but like, you know, silver colored metal, steel color, whatever you want to call it. If y'all have suggestions, let me know. So, as you can see, like I'm showing you side profiles of the knife, and it may not come across as well, but when we're looking at that piece of metal, what I'm looking to really do is probably make it at least half as thick as it actually is now. And this was something that, like, no one really told me when I started. I kind of just had to figure it out, and that's like how to guesstimate how much material you actually have to move around. So, like, if I want that little billet to be about half as thick, I know that I have about twice that material to play around. It won't really be the same, like one for one, but I know that I can either make that longer by, you know, whatever that amount of area is, or I can make that wider. And you kind of have to play a balancing act with that. Sometimes you can underestimate how much material there is. That's easy. You just kind of cut off the excess and it works beautifully. That's overestimating how much material you have. Yes. Look, if you end up with too much, just cut it off, but don't leave yourself with too little. You get what I'm saying? Because, I mean, then you kind of have to change the design of your entire project, and if you get too loose or too thin, it can affect the other parts of the knife making process. Wider and longer. But yeah, so it'll probably be another 3 to 4 heats to get that to the level that I want, and then that'll be like width and length, and then I'll start looking at actually putting like the shape of the actual knife that I want in there. Another thing that the videos don't always show is like learning moving the metal around and stuff. It's a process that takes patience. So when I first started, I didn't know what I was doing. I was just hammering stuff and hoping it went in the right direction. But I have been asked about, like, how does the metal move under the hammer? Well, I'll show you here in a second, but when you see the kind of hammer strike that I'm doing, I can actually show you. So what I'm actually hitting on is the side right here. It's at an angle, and that's why you'll see, like, there will be like little valleys that are put into the metal, and then I'll go back to that flat face and hammer them out. And what that's doing is that's just kind of very quickly, like, digging into the metal and spreading it apart. And that's one of the ways you can move metal. The other hammer I have can kind of do that too, but it also has like a rounded face, like a ball peen hammer, if you know what that is, and that's more for moving generally metal in all directions. So like when I go to start spreading it out more, or if I needed to, I would probably use that as opposed to this. But I want to control it right now and just get length out of it. Valleys that I'm creating, that's where I'm spreading the metal, and then hammering it flattens everything out and finishes that process. So some other things that I've been asked about previously is like the differences between a coal forge and the one I'm using right now, which is propane. There's a few differences. If you're a beginner, like as much as I would like to say start with a coal forge because that's what I did, it is a lot less forgiving because coal forges very easily heat up to the temperature to melt metal. And I think out of the first 4 things I tried to make, I think only one of them I didn't immediately accidentally mess it up or get like halfway through and then melt off a piece of it and then have to like wait till everything cools to like dig all the slag out of it later on. And I mean, it happens faster than you think. But with the propane forges, like you'd really have to try to get it to that kind of heat. So it's a lot more forgiving. And it'll still get you high enough to actually do the hardening process. So actually, I have the very first project I ever made. And it was this. And what this was a basically like it's made for like scooping the coals and moving them around in the coal forge. Obviously I don't use it that much anymore, just because like having an open flame like that in the backyard would probably not be a great idea. And then of course like it takes a lot of fuel and produces, depending on the coal you're using, although I think all coal does this, it also produces like really smelly like gases and stuff, especially if it's really dirty coal. But yeah, so this was made out of a railroad spike, and that was the first project I actually completed without destroying it. a bit off on my 4 heat assessment. I think it's actually a bit thicker than I thought it was. So. Another thing to remember is the thinner you make the material, the less time you're going to have. So you really have to get in there and start working it immediately. So you should know kind of what you're trying to do before you take it out of the forge. But that also means it'll start heating up faster. So, another thing to keep in mind, if you're hammering something on a flat surface, and you're working like the top piece up here, this flat or this bottom side is almost always going to get flatter just because of the way that you're hammering on it. So, it can be really useful to kind of like use that as a gauge while you're going to kind of determine whether or not you're actually getting something flat when you're hammering the top of it. Because you can just turn it to the side and compare. And if one looks all wonky, that side you're hammering, and the other's nice and straight, you know you're not done yet. Already bigger and wider than we had when we started. So, once we've gotten through getting generally the size, meaning width, length, and all that we want, what we're going to start doing is actually forging the profile. So we'll start forging out the tip, the spine, and then whatever shape we decide for the handle. I'll probably do some kind of like recessed handle that has like a grip groove. And then after that's all done, we'll start, if we want, we'll start forging in the bevel. You can also grind that in if you just don't feel comfortable forging it. Because, I don't know, maybe like you're just not that experienced, or, you know, like the bevels are just hard. You can do that, but we'll start working on that to get it to the closest we can shape that we want for our final product. So, it's probably going to be a few more heats of actually getting that thing drawn out. And then I think I'll start with the blade, since the blade's going to stay as a bit of a... It's a bit easier to do the minute little things you need to do to the blade to fix it, rather than the handle. If you start warping the handle, since it'll be kind of like a thinner material at some points, it could be more hazardous to the project, let's say. Another way of saying that is I might break it. So, as we start getting to like the final width that we want, because that's the first thing we're doing, you're going to want to be a little bit lighter with the hammer strokes, just because like one errant blow could dig pretty deep, and if you don't have that much material, it's going to show up on your final product, or you're going to have to spend, like I did in the beginning, hours trying to grind those pits and stuff out from the hammer blows, and it's really just not worth it. Plus it like significantly changes how you're like wanting that knife to come out. So bear it in mind as you get closer. Just be more gentle. You don't have to be like just smashing this thing the whole time, which I will touch on here in a second after this next heat. Okay, completely forgot what I was going to talk about, but what I will say is that basically whenever you're doing something like this, I always keep in mind like a general idea of what I want it to be, and then I accept the fact that things won't always go that way. So, I mean, if you want something that's like very specific and, you know, absolutely perfect and stuff like that, then you might as well mill something out of steel as opposed to forging it. Now, don't get me wrong, there are absolutely blacksmiths, armor makers, stuff like that, who do an incredibly precise job and all that. But to me, the forging process is just never going to be as precise as milling something. And I personally think it keeps more personality in the thing that you make. Okay, so we're getting very close to what I want the blade's edge to look, or the thickness of the blade. It'll actually be the spine, not the edge. But one of the other things I was going to say is some people will say not to forge something when it's a certain temperature or not a certain color. Generally, yes, that's true. However, you can still use the heat at the end of the heat when it starts to turn back into whatever the other color is, like its natural color. And what that can help you do is, because the metal's not as hot, it's not going to move as much. So if you're cleaning up a surface with the hammer, that can be a really good time to do those smaller blows and just kind of even everything out, because like you're going to be moving less metal even if you're making harder strikes. Also, since we're a little bit into this already, how is the sound? Is everything good on the sound? Hold on, there's a lot to read here. Let's see. Okay, so the forge is a little bit loud, and I can speak up. Yeah, so I tried the lavalier mic I have. I'll try to get it to work for the next stream, but for some reason it just wasn't working with me today. One other thing I could try to do is move the actual camera back from the forge, and that might help with the sounds being so off. So I'll give that a shot first. just move this over. Okay, you're standing in. So yeah, I'm gonna have a second camera soon. Should be here today. But then I'll have more angles. So there will be probably one here, and then there will be two different ones. One more zoomed out for me at the forge, and then the other one will be kind of what you're seeing now, which is really just that close-up on whatever the piece I'm working on is, so you can actually see what I'm talking about. But yeah, I mean that is a good idea. So yes. So right there you can see like a different color than the rest of the heated metal. Anytime you see that, that's what's going to flake off and become this scale. Oof. So I almost did something that I have done before, and I highly don't recommend it, and that is forgetting that these are still really hot. And I almost set them on a cord, the one going to the camera that you're looking at the forge with. This will be hot enough to melt through. It won't melt through the copper, but it will melt through like the plastic, and it can mess up cords. I think I've destroyed like 2 extension cords in that exact way. So something to bear in mind. Also, don't ever touch these. Like, let them cool for a long time. See that color differently here. All those little bubbles are going to flake off. Right here is going to be the spine of the blade, and then we're going to hammer this into the edge. And all of this stuff is hot, so that's the stuff I'm talking about that flakes off and like lands on you, and that's the stuff that really sucks. Even wearing just like half-length gloves, I still feel it on my arms. It's not that bad though, but that's also why I wear a ball cap, and that's because sometimes you'll feel it like, you know, hit you in the glasses or something like that. You can feel it on your face, and I mean, I just don't really want to get it in my hair. y'all have any other questions? Yeah, me and you both. But it's got to be slow going or we'll mess it up. And that's another thing, like, patience is a virtue in this. If you try to work too quickly through a piece of material, I mean, unless you've got a lot of skill, like, there's guys out there that can definitely do it. But if you're new and you try to work too quickly, you're definitely not going to get the kind of results that you really want. One of the things I was thinking about earlier is I was saying that it's not always about, like, just beating on the metal. And what I meant by that is very often it's better to use, like, different body mechanics. So, like, whenever I actually get everything over here set up so you can see what I'm doing, you'll notice that I kind of, like, sometimes I'll come up on the balls of my toes, or I'll kind of throw my hip up when I'm doing it. And that's just a way to conserve energy and get the same kind of power out of your stroke. Because if you're forging for hours at a time, you're going to get tired. Already start to see the general shape coming out for this one. Okay, so I don't know if you can see what I just did. Hold on. Stretching and stuff like that is kind of person specific. I don't really stretch before I work, but like I said, that technique of using your legs to kind of bounce up and your hips more, that is definitely going to save your back over time, as well as keep you from like just completely wearing out your arms to the point where you're just not able to afford it anymore. And of course, you know, when you start, you're going to be limited in how much you can do because you just have to build up those muscles. And swinging a hammer over and over and over again is a lot more of an endurance thing than people think. So, I don't know if you can see it on here, but right there, I put a chalk line. Yeah, it doesn't really come across very well in the video, but what it is I used a chalk stone to basically create a line of how long I want the blade, and that's based off of the Hardy hole. So I measured out 3.5 inches because that's how long I want the blade to be. And having that quick reference there saves you a lot of time and effort because you don't have to hold up a measuring tape or anything. You already know where that line is. Put the tip of your blade up against the Hardy hole side that you measured from, and just, oh, okay, it's not 3.5 inches yet. And there's a lot of like that is one of the best, fastest ways I have for measuring things, and to me it saves a lot of time and effort. You probably see me use some of them in the other videos. Here we can see that's about 3.5 inches, so I don't need to make this blade any longer. I need to start making it wider. So how wide should we make this blade? Right now, I'm thinking somewhere between like 1.5 to 2 inches. It'll be a fat little blade, but I think that would probably be good. What do y'all think? We're not making an axe. So it's going to be a drop point hunter, so probably just like an everyday carry for someone. Definitely shouldn't be 5 inches wide. That's insane. 4 feet, that's a sword. I'm not making that little piece of metal into a sword. are going to switch hammers now, though. Edge blade with Haman. One having red, one having blue side. Dude, I don't... Do I look like Alway the Elvish Smith? No. Y'all are ridiculous. Yeah, I think we're going to do 1.5 inches wide. Exact spitting image. I don't know about that. Isn't Alway a what is it? Damn it! Not a Maiar. He's the other thing. And I highly doubt that I look like either of them. So, what the hell are those? The Vanar or Valor or whatever they're called. Celebrimbor. I don't. Wait, does Celebrimbor in the books have a beard? I'm pretty sure not. I know in the movies and stuff they made all the elves seem like they don't have facial hair at all, but I'm pretty sure that's incorrect. Definitely. Okay, good. Now I know that for sure. I'm gonna have to look that up, because I'm pretty sure some of the elf high lords and all that do have beards. Like I thought Círdan the Shipwright had a beard. Maybe a noise gate? I might also look at, like, because I have like another microphone that I could use, and maybe I'll set it up like right here, and then that way I can actually speak into it, because it's a condenser mic, so it should keep all the extra sound out. That way you guys can actually hear what I'm saying. Hold on. So now you can see. I forget you guys can't hear me. But yeah, you guys should be. Yeah, I know how to connect the other mic. I just need to do it, and hopefully the laptop I'm using will actually work. So when I'm on the forge, I was pointing out some stuff, and basically that's just going to be the start of where we make the handle. At first I was thinking about doing something with like a middle piece that like sits in between your two fingers, but I'm kind of leaning towards more of like a slimmer looking handle with a wider base. camera. Now it's broken. Let's see. What finish? So the finish of the blade is going to be something totally different. When we're talking about what kind of finish it'll have, there's a few ways to kind of go about that. Like I don't put paint on mine, for instance. I don't know why you would. But if you look back at like the sheep's hoof or foot or whatever the knife I made, you'll see like there's a lot of black on the blade itself, and that's the carburization of the steel. And that comes from like just the forging process. Like if I let this piece of metal cool down or I quench it, it's gonna have like the metal is actually going to be black, and it's because it draws bits of carbon out as you're doing the forging. So no, it was a joke about it breaking because I just threw it on the table. It's fine. It's in a package. I hope it's fine. But so whenever I think about what I want to do with that is I can either leave that carburization on there as the finish, which does give it some protection from rust and stuff. I could polish it with the belts, which is what I do in some of the videos. That's that stuff that makes it real shiny and all that. You can also do like a less polished version and then just oil it if you want to. I would never recommend sealing it with like a spray can of sealant or anything. That's just it doesn't work well. It's not worth doing, and if you have to like strip the whole thing. It's gonna look like ass. Just don't do it. But one of the other things that you can do is if you want to get it that real nice polished, flat, shiny, whatever, you can do that, and then because obviously flattening all that stuff out is going to take off the carburization. You can then put it into a solution of ferric chloride and water, and what that'll do is it'll leach some of that carbon to the surface and have it bound to the metal too. And that's what people are doing whenever you see someone etching something in acid. The high carbon steel is having the carbon drawn out to the surface, and that's what the acid is doing. It's removing some of the material, but that's what's leaving behind. So the thing I was just pointing at is how when you're hammering, the side you're hammering on will upset a lot more than the other side of it. It's a good way of getting that other side flat, but you have to be aware of that and know when and where you're going to move your metal, because now we have two sides. One's a lot thicker than the other, and we want it to be generally even. Yeah, I'm full of like weird, useless information. Well, I mean, it's useful if you're a blacksmith, not if you're not, I suppose. So, what you can see me doing now is when I'm hammering, I'm actually using the side of it, but I'm hammering heavier on one side of the handle than the back side of the handle, and that's just to start evening out that material. Now, what that'll do is it'll start pushing that metal on that side further down and out, so it is going to deform the end of it, but because of the style of handle that I just talked about with like a swoop at the end, that's actually going to help us, not hurt us. Work smarter, not harder. Water. And there will be like, so we won't finish this project today. I don't have enough time for that. But the metal work, the forging part, we will. And then there will be a video for this one that'll come out probably in the next few weeks, and that'll be like an actual video like the other ones I do. Now, if you guys are interested in seeing more than just the forging process, if you want to see me live stream how to make like a handle, or you know how I do the other pieces, just let me know, and I'll see if I can make something interesting enough for that. Always stay hydrated. they are. So, like I said earlier, like with the coal forge, I used to melt steel. So, I mean, you can just look up the melting point of like low carbon steel and figure out what that is. And for this, I use this forge whenever I'm doing like the heat, not the heat treat, but the hardening for a blade. And that means it has to get up to at least 1600 degrees. And it definitely gets up higher than that. So, yeah, I mean, it's not something you want to stick your hand in or anything. But just remember, everything that touches that's metal, like the tongs, the anvil face itself, all of that is going to absorb some of that heat. So treat everything like it's hot. Or don't, and lose some skin. I don't know what to tell you. So, when you're going forward, though, in a project like this and you're making like a handle, the reason that you want everything, aside from just like aesthetic reasons and functional reasons, one of the reasons you want to get everything kind of flat, especially when it comes to like your handle, you don't want to have like a large variation in like valleys and stuff like that, is because when you put your handle scales on, which is what we're going to do with this, it won't fit flush because, you know, some of it's going to be flat and some of it's not. So it'll leave like gaps, and it doesn't really look that good, especially if like you're not using some kind of like epoxy or something. But even with the epoxy, it still looks kind of bad. Some people do like it as like an aesthetic thing because it like really shows that it's handmade and all that stuff. But other people don't, and you know, you just gotta figure out if you have a customer. I mean, if it's just you, you make whatever the hell you think looks good. But you know, if you have a customer, you're gonna want to consider how do they view that. chains around your anvil. Okay, so, and are you wearing fire-resistant clothing or doesn't it? Okay, so the first question, why do I have chains on the anvil? That is because in some small way they help dull like the ringing left behind when you strike the anvil and the piece. And I got a few comments in some of my videos. You have to remember, I don't hear the ringing most of the time because unlike right now, I forge usually while I'm listening to music or something else, and so like my headphones kind of cancel out a lot of noise. But that is for the same thing, that red thing that you see there on the back side of the anvil. That thing is a magnet, and both of those are meant just to dampen that sound from the anvil. I'll answer your next question here in a second. Okay, so the answer to am I wearing fire-resistant clothing? So the gloves are leather, and I think they have like a linen liner or something. As for the shirt, no, but all the clothes I wear when I forge are made of like some kind of natural material that doesn't melt, like cotton. Like this shirt, if it does get hit with stuff, at most it would do is probably like smolder, and it wouldn't like burst into flames typically unless it's like in direct fire, and it won't melt, which is another very important thing. Like I have like workout shirts or something like that are more breathable and might be more comfortable, but if a piece of the scale lands on it, it basically turns to plastic and then just burns into my skin. So short answer, kind of. I also have a leather apron right there that I could wear, but I really, like, once I got through a lot of the early stuff, I kind of stopped wearing it. I might still wear it if, like, it's a kind of an unwieldy piece and I think I'm going to hit myself with it or something like that. It has saved me a few times. But the other thing is I wear closed-toed leather boots, and those are honestly the thing, besides the hands, that probably saved me the most. And it's because sometimes you'll drop the piece and like it'll land on my boot, but it won't immediately like burn through the boot because it's leather. I mean, yeah, I guess if someone was going to hit you with fire. Although, if someone's hitting you with fire, you have a whole bunch of other issues, so I would tackle those first, you know what I mean? Oh, let's see. Does the yellow glasses with the fire anyway? No, actually, so these are actually contrast glasses. They are for either shooting or driving, like at night and stuff. It just brings things into like better relief. The issue is that they're the only other safety glasses I have. Sometimes you'll see me wear like a black and red pair. The problem with those is like I've taken so many like little bits of metal. Like you guys probably didn't hear me yell a second ago, but like I felt a large piece of scale hit me in the face. And basically the lenses on those other ones have gotten so bad that like I can't see out of them anymore. And part of that is because they're just plastic. I mean, I'm sure these are some kind of plastic, or maybe they're glass, so they'll hold up a little bit better. But basically, they're just the last pair of glasses I have, and I can't really see out of my old ones anymore. Yeah, you know what? I'll get right on the whole waterbending learning thing. Maybe I'll steal a scroll from some pirates. Yeah, it would. Just the Elder Scroll. I mean, I haven't played Oblivion yet. There might be some like fun stuff in there to try to make, but I don't know. I don't know. If you've played it, let me know if it's worth it. Well, I mean, the one from Kung Fu Panda reflects that you have it in you to do whatever. Yeah, you're right. It's blank, so it's. Although, wasn't it made of gold or something? You might just sell that and get some lessons. Absolutely make something from Oblivion. Okay. Sell it and buy a really cool weapon with some sweet enchantments. Starting with Daedric armor. Yeah, I'm not making a Daedric armor. I don't even know what that looks like, but I've played Skyrim, and if it looks anything like that, absolutely not. First of all, I don't have the setup for that, and second of all, I don't have enough skill with armor crafting yet. So. When I do, though, man, I would love to have a shop big enough to make something like that. That'd be awesome. Yeah, we'll work towards it. But as you can see, we're getting right about to the final shape that we want. So now we're just going to go across the blade, clean things up with a few more hammer blows, and then really like start getting into probably our stopping point for that project with the forging. And then I'll move on and create like the handle for it later. Yes, first you need a Daedric heart. But, so what we're going to start doing now is I'm going to start forging in the where the bevel will be, and that's also going to like extend the blade just or widen it a little bit, and then that should be good for this project. But yeah, so now you see like that bend in the handle, which is what I was talking about with that swoop. Yeah, I mean I think it's gonna look good. It'll also keep like your fingers up off of whatever you're trying to like cut, so it'll give you some clearance. And then we won't be doing the hardening right now because I do like the general shaping of things on the grinder and stuff before I do hardening, and the reason for that is, and I could probably show it in one of my other videos, or in another video, but when you're grinding things, you're heating that metal, and if you harden it first and then temper it, the heat treat's already done. So you never want to bring it back up to that kind of temperature again, or you'll ruin the heat treat, or you'll ruin the hardening. So that's why I like to do all the major shaping, and then I'll come back and do the hardening and the tempering. And then everything after that is really just cleanup, sharpening, and like some polishing. Y'all never answered though. What kind of wood do you think I should use for the handle? Should I make it walnut? I think it might have like oak or cherry too. And then I could always use epoxy for like the scales. Oak. Yeah, I mean I can look at doing oak. I don't know if I have any left. I think I do though. So I'll check my little handle material stash I have over there. I was thinking about doing the walnut with like the metal or like silver colored bolts, Corby bolts, so that it kind of contrasts and looks real nice. But I mean I could do oak. Okay, should be the last heat. We're going to go ahead and straighten everything out, and then we should be good. We just need to let it cool for probably a couple hours, and then it'll be ready to go on to the next thing. So and I think that'll probably be the end of today's stream. I can answer any questions that y'all still have, but next time I might make more than one project, or maybe I'll do some of the other steps in the process, and you guys can kind of see how that works as well. was incorrect. We need another heat because there's still one high point in the center of the blade, which, I mean, I could leave it, but I'm going to even it out anyway. Whew. Okay, so well, I guess one final point is that whenever I turn off my forge after I'm done with a project, one thing that I'll do is I'll put the piece back in there and let it cool down slowly with that heat. It's kind of like a... Ow, fuck. Sorry for the language. I think I just swatted a wasp out of the sky. It was unpleasant. Anyway, what was I saying? Oh yeah, the metal heating up or getting up to temperature and then cooling down is it's like a shortened form of like the annealing process, which is actually supposed to be done more over like a few hours. But what it essentially does is it takes all the stress from hammering on it or hardening or anything else, all that stuff. It takes that stress out of the metal and makes it more like, I don't want to say stronger because that's not really the right word, but it just makes it easier to like, it's a little more pliable so it's not as brittle. That's what it does. It's not as brittle. And the tempering process also does that, but annealing is like almost like resetting the board. So I hope you guys have enjoyed this live stream. It's the first one I've done. If you want to see more like it, leave me a comment and maybe even a project that you want to see me do. If it's a big project, it probably isn't going to be done, at least not in one sitting. That's for dang sure. But I'm going to have a few new videos coming out here pretty soon, so keep your eyes out for that, and I will see you guys in the next one.